Hey, what's going on, guys? This is part 2 of my tutorial of how to create this nice looking low poly game ready grass. This is the final part. You will learn how to bake your high poly mesh details to the low poly plane, how to do the textures, and how to prepare your grass meshes to be used in Unreal Engine 5. And then we're gonna create a very basic shader. Let's create a new Substance Painter project. We're gonna use Unreal Engine 4 template and 4K resolution. Select your low poly mesh, which is the plane mesh that we've created in Blender. And hit OK. And here's our plane mesh that we're gonna use to bake all of the details from the high poly. Go to the shader settings and select the shader that will allow the usage of the opacity map. With the new shader settings, we can now add an opacity map to our channels. We will now be able to bake the opacity map through the baking window. Let's now open the Bake Mesh Maps. To open this window, we can also use a shortcut Ctrl-Shift-B. Select your high poly mesh. Change the resolution to a lower number because we're gonna do some test bakes, so we don't need a very high resolution at the moment. Remember to activate opacity to bake also the opacity map. And hit bake. As you can see, we have some problems with the bake. Create a fill layer and we're gonna test our new opacity map that we've just baked. Make sure you have opacity on in the settings of your fill layer. Now let's go to opacity and switch to our newly created opacity map. Remember to use styling by 1. As you can see, the bake wasn't successful and we just have to rebake it with different settings. Press Ctrl-Shift-B to open the baker window and let's change the max frontal distance and max rear distance to 1, which is the max distance that the baker will bake from. As you can see, the bake is pretty good and we can now rebake it with the highest settings. We will use 4K resolution. Let's change the color of the fill layer. If you want, you can switch to the base color channel. To see your base color texture, create a new fill layer. Right mouse button on the fill layer and add a mask with color selection. And pick one of the colors with the color picker. Switch to the material and as you can see we have our opacity messed up because we have different opacity channels on each layer. And we have to create a global opacity map. This layer should be above all of the other layers. Ctrl D to duplicate the layer and drag and drop it to the top. Press and hold Alt and left click on the OP to activate just the opacity channel and turn off other channels. And on other layers, just left click on the OP to turn off the opacity channel. Let's now add some variation to the colors based on our ID maps. add a new fill layer, and we're gonna add a new mask, and let's add a new generator, and we're gonna use a curvature generator. So type in curvature and you'll get the result. Let's decrease the global balance. We can use this curvature generator in different ways. We can also invert it, as you can see, and we'll get a different result, depending on what kind of look we are aiming for. And change the color of the fill layer using the color picker, and change the color to be a bit more dark, so we have some variation and so it doesn't look so flat. We can go back to the curvature generator and we can use it to add this nice dark outline around the grass blades. This is a really basic texturing process because the final result is pretty clean and stylized. Let's now create a new Unreal Engine 5 project. Go to the Games tab, create a first person template, click on it and name it correctly and click create when you're ready. We don't need most of the assets that come with the template, so just remove them with left click and delete. Now go back to Blender and we'll cut out the grass meshes from the plane that we used for baking. Tab to go to edit mode, K to use the knife tool, left click and go around each grass mesh. Try to add points as close to the grass as possible. So left click to add new points. When you're happy with your shape, press enter to apply. Press Z and solid to switch to the solid mode, L to select each mesh and P to separate it out. Then select what's left and delete. Now press K to activate the knife tool and start adding new edge loops to get rid of the angles. We need a more dense mesh in order to bend and twist the mesh later on to achieve some nice looking shapes. Because we want to create a grass mesh, not just a simple flat plane. It may be a bit too many polygons, but it's always easy to reduce the polygons, so I wouldn't worry about that. I will use Nanite in Unreal Engine 5, so it will automatically create LOD for each mesh. In your case, you might need to create LOD for your meshes. If you want to learn how to create LOD for your meshes, let me know in the comments section and I will create a video about it. Try to add new edge loops so we can bend the mesh smoothly at the end. So the edge loop needs to go through the mesh a few times. Create a new folder, name it correctly and use my export settings to export your meshes. We don't have any LODs, so we can just click on each object and export it. Go back to Unreal and import your meshes and use Nanite on each mesh, so we don't have to create LODs, and drag and drop your meshes. Go back to Substance Painter, go to the output template In the export settings, we'll use red channel for ambient occlusion, green channel for roughness, and blue channel for metallic. Open the material and drag and drop your textures. Connect your normal map to normal. Connect red channel from the packed map to the ambient occlusion, blue channel to metallic, and green channel to roughness. And save the material. Click on the result node of the material and go to the settings. Change the blend mode to masked, shading model to two-sided foliage, and turn on two-sided so we can see the grass texture from both sides. Go back to Blender, tab to go to the edit mode, and we'll modify the mesh so it doesn't look so flat. Turn on proportion editing and start editing the mesh. Try to give it some nice 3D grass shape so it actually looks like grass and not just like a flat plains. So left click on each vertex and G to move and R to rotate to give it this nice twist. And when you're happy with your result, you can export it. And do the same for the other meshes. Export your mesh and go back to Unreal. Select your grass meshes and move them with the arrows. Press Alt before you move, it will duplicate the mesh. We'll use it to create more grass groups inside Unreal. From now on you can start creating different groups of grass. You can also do this inside Blender and just export your groups from Blender. Now we can focus on improving the render. So let's add a point light from the Place Actors window on the left. Move it up using the arrow and change the intensity of the light because it's a bit too strong. And now in the outliner window, go to the post-processing effects and turn on the bloom effect. Change the intensity and the threshold. Scroll down and open Film and change the slope and toe settings. And now open the color grading and go to shadows, gain, and increase the intensity and play with the colors in the color wheel. I'm looking for a very slight change in the color, so don't overdo it. You can now resize some of the grass meshes to give it some variation, some randomness. We'll now create a very basic wind effect in our shader. Right mouse button to search for the simple grass wind node, and right mouse button on each pin to promote to a parameter. For the last pin we'll need to create a constant by pressing 1 on the keyboard, holding it, and then pressing left mouse button to add it to the shader. We'll now add a texture coordinates node in order to use the mask to mask out the bottom part of the grass, because we don't want to move the bottom part of the grass with the wind. I will now use Photoshop to create the mask. Let's open the base color texture. Ctrl-Shift-N, create a new layer. Use Ctrl-R to activate the ruler. Left click and hold and drag it to the bottom part of the grass to mark the ground level. And we will now know where is the ground level and where we should put our mask. Use the gradient tool and drag your gradient so it doesn't cover the bottom part, so there is a black gap. Select both layers with Shift and Ctrl E to merge the layers and save the file as a new file. Now drag and drop your newly created mask, connect the texture coordinate node to the texture sample, and then we'll use the red channel to connect it to the pin. And then let's select all the nodes, move them to the right, and connect the simple grass wind node to the world position offset pin. Save the material. And we'll now create an instance of the base material, so you don't have to wait so long to save each small change to the material. Click on the main material with the right mouse button and create an instance of the material. We'll modify the parameters through the newly created instance of the main material. So let's modify them so the wind can actually work with our grass meshes. We'll now have to go through all the grass meshes to switch their materials. And this is the final result. I hope that you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching. You can watch my other tutorials by clicking the link in the upper right hand corner. That will show up now on your screen.